Welcome to the Rex Andrews Show. Glad to have you with us. If you are a first-time listener, glad to have you. Glad to have you in the conversation. Please don't forget to do two things. Number one, subscribe so you can get the latest updates. And then two, if you would not be afraid to do this for us, we're not afraid to beg. In fact, I'm a well-dressed beggar. I got a collar on today. So please give us those stars. If you like what we're doing, it helps us for placement in the app stores. Okay, one last thing here. We want to thank those who are tuning in. Got a new feature. We're recognizing people in all kinds of spots around the world. So we would like to invite the listeners from Goodland, Kansas. If you've not been to Goodland, you need to go. So thank you for the folks in Goodland. All right, thanks to our listeners and our fabulous guests. Got another one of those today. We currently have listeners in 32 countries across 6 continents. A little over 500 cities that are dialing in to take a listen. So we're excited to have you. So thank you. Thank you very much. The show is one of the fastest growing podcasts, new podcasts in the marketplace, and we have you to thank for that. Okay, so the show's all about stories. Got another great one for you today. Excited to have this guest on. Like anybody else, we have really interesting stories because success doesn't fall out of the sky. It just doesn't. Now, recently near me, I had airplane parts fall out of the sky from a United airplane that was passing by and crushed a few things, but success is not like that. So we're going to talk about our guest today and how he got to what he's doing today and all the exciting things. So I'd like to welcome to our show this morning an author, okay, an award-winning game show host, which there aren't many of those that we've had a chance to interview. In fact, this is the first. And then also he is an animal rescue advocate. So I'd like to welcome to the show this morning, Todd Newton. Todd, how are you?
I'm doing well, Rex. It's good to be here. And hello, beautiful people of Goodland, Kansas. Huh?
It's interesting. You go and look through your stats and stuff.
Yeah.
And look, there's all these obscure places. I'm like, well, welcome to the show. So.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? That's one of the beautiful things about podcasting. It's we can look at those analytics. And when I was coming up in the world of radio, you just kind of turned the microphone on and hoped that somebody out there in the city that you live in was listening to you. But yeah, to be able to broadcast digitally all over the world from, studios that we get to decorate the way we want to decorate.
Exactly.
And, I've got my dog by my feet here. You can't beat this. I love this podcast world.
Yeah, it's amazing. I have been able to interview people all over the world, and just because of the technology. And then again, connecting with people just everywhere. I love it. And the fact it's authentic, like you said. I got 5 kids over my shoulder. There they are. That's my world, and they're there. So yes, we get to do all kinds of fun things as far as dialing in. Okay, so Todd, excited to go through your story. Okay, and so this is a long list, and it's a list that not everybody's used to having on these interviews. And I'll ask the questions so you don't have to write them down. So
sure,
we want to know where you were born. Okay. And then also too, where you grew up, because that can be very different. I had a guest on the show, Ellie Soja, who basically moved 63 times before the age of 18. Yeah. Refugee camps, all kinds of things. So that's great. Yeah. We wanted to know what you were interested in as a kid, sports, computers, drama, theater, music, shoplifting. Don't laugh about that one. I had a guest on the show, Larry Cole. By age of 15, he was a car thief. So we do interesting things when we grow up. So that's influence. Want to know if you have siblings. And if you do have siblings, if any of them survived your harassment and growing up. Then we want to talk about your parents. Now, parental influence is huge. What I've kind of seen in doing this show is there's been 3 types of influence. One is this really super supportive, launching pad type parents, they knock you out and help you get to that next level. 2, sort of the indifferent parents, that, yeah, they were there, but they were eking out a living and, you were more housemates than, parent type situation. And then the one that's frustrating, and I've seen many times, is just a horrible experience. And the child grows up thinking, I don't want to be like this at all. So we won't talk about that. Then we'll hopscotch through some of your education, then some of the cool things you've done, some pivot points in your life and some influencing things that would tell your story, and then what you're up to today. And I know you're doing some amazing things. So that's the way we're going to roll this today. Tell your story. So if you could, Todd, take us back to the beginning and tell us where you were born, and then we'll lead from there.
You got it. Well, that sounds like a very comprehensive list. We'll either be madly in love or never want to speak to each other again by the end of this interview. I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. Wonderful place to grow up, right on the banks of the muddy Mississippi.
Okay.
Was born on Cinco de Mayo, 1970. It was a Tuesday, I am told, and born in the downtown area there. I grew up in St. Louis. I left when I was in my early 20s to move out to Hollywood.
Okay.
But wonderful childhood, man. We grew up in the suburbs, a house on a cul-de-sac, great school, great friends. And, St. Louis was a wonderful Midwestern town full of Midwestern values with just the right amount of big city sprinkled on top.
Right.
So we kind of got the best of both worlds, my brother and I. To answer another one of your questions, I have a younger brother, 4 years younger, and
okay.
It was a great upbringing. I'm very grateful for that.
That's fantastic. So are you and your brother close? I mean, how was your relationship growing up?
It was great. Yeah. I think 4 years is the perfect space between siblings, especially when there are only two.
Yeah.
Because I got to play the big brother role and he got to have a big brother. Right. And, my kids now are spaced about that same distance. So yeah, it was wonderful. My brother now still lives in the state. He works for the state. Okay. Wonderful job. And he's doing really, really well. Mom and dad still live in the same house we grew up in. Try as I might to get to try and get them to sell that place and, move out to the beach or out to the desert where they never have to shovel snow again. But, those Midwestern folks, man, they're not as welcoming to change as others. And they like to keep things as they are. So, my brother is, I like to say he got the IQ, I got the EQ. He's definitely the thinker of the two and the smarter of the two. I am the louder of the two. And since I'm the only one speaking to you, I am the better looking of the two.
Now, I love your philosophy about 4 years. That's great because, the one thing, I'm 4 years older than my younger brother. Now there's four of us, but the one thing that's nice is that you're far enough in school, the distance in school, because most high schools are 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
It was 3 when I was growing up, that I got to have my own identity in high school. And so did he, because I was gone by the time he was in. And so it's just a nice distance between siblings because you've got that window. So. Yeah,
I think it was nice because I was a senior when he was a freshman. So I got to be there, to kind of be the senior big brother. Yeah. And then he got the rest of his high school career, to kind of be on his own. You're right about identity. And, I'm very grateful that my kids were the same. My oldest is a boy. So he was, protective of his sister the first year there. And, but now she's queen of the castle, man. So
exactly.
I don't worry about them.
Yeah. So what'd your parents do when you were growing up? What type of occupation?
Sure. My father was in the banking industry.
Okay.
He's retired now, obviously. My mother was studying to be a nurse when she got pregnant with me, and she put all of that on hold and eventually just abandoned it to stay home and raise my brother and me.
Nice.
And I think, realizing and appreciating the value of having a stay-at-home mother makes me not only appreciate the fact that she did not give up a dream, but replace one dream for another.
Right, right.
Being a mom became much more important to her than being a nurse. But it gave me an appreciation for women who do stay home with their children. It is, as I'm sure you know, with 5 kids, it is not an easy job. There's nothing lazy about being a stay-at-home mother.
No.
And my kid's mother, we're no longer married, but we're very tight. We live very close to each other. Right. I am, in all of my books and many times on the podcast, whenever the issue of mothering comes up, I am the first to be her cheerleader. I have seen the sacrifice, not only physically, but emotionally. And it is draining. It is draining. And, I bow before stay-at-home moms. I really do.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting because that was an era where it was easier to do that,
Yeah.
as far
Yeah.
as that. But again, we were blessed enough to have, her stay home, especially during the formative years. And gosh, it just makes a difference in kids.
It sure does. And the kids, when they hit that 15, 16, 17, they start to appreciate it too. They start to realize it too. But it's not a job that that women are thanked for very often. So I like to do that every opportunity I get.
So real quick, so people can follow along, we have a lot of people who comment and say, hey, I want to know about these folks, because we do put your website and your contacts on our site, but because we're not going to be able to tell everything. So could you share real quick for those that are following?
Sure. Well, the best place, Todd headquarters is the website, which is toddnewtononline.com. And we make it pretty simple. I've got links to my YouTube channel up there, links to my Twitter. Those are the only social media sites I give any attention to. I love YouTube. Love it.
Yes, YouTube.
And we also have a merchandise page up there. I've written a few books, and as you were kind enough to mention, we do a lot of work with animal rescue organizations around the country. And I'm very proud of the fact that 100% of the proceeds of those books goes straight to finding homes for dogs and cats. And right now is a very, very important time coming out of COVID. People just weren't as inclined to go to the shelter and add to their families the way they have been. And,
right.
We lost so many animals to euthanization because there was no place else to put them. There was nothing else to do. I mean, everyone's hands were tied, but we work very closely with Best Friends Animal Society based out of Los Angeles, Lucky Dog Rescue based out of Phoenix, Arizona, Saving Paws based out of Phoenix, Arizona, and several other no-kill shelters around the country. So everything is on toddnewtononline.com.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. So looking back on your youth, how would you describe your family environment? Was it super supportive? Somewhere in the middle? You said it was great, but what do you look back and say?
Yeah, I'll expand on that. Sure. I've got to say super supportive. I think when a kid comes to a parent at the age of 13 and says, listen, I want to be a DJ on the radio, today it's a different story. There is really no commercial radio anymore except for a platform for political commentary. But as far as music goes, anything else, it's all satellite or digital. But especially growing up in St. Louis, which was a great live music town, a blues town, a rock and roll town, we had venues everywhere where you could see incredible acts. So radio was really special there in the 70s and 80s. And I told my parents I wanted to be that voice on the radio. I could not peel myself away from the radio, but I didn't care much for the music. Didn't matter. We look back on the 80s and it's not an era that will go down as some of the best music in history.
No, that's true.
But that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to create that excitement for listeners that the radio personalities were creating for me. And I'm talking about, folks outside of the Midwest won't know these names, but Jimmy Page, the Nighttime Rage, and Big Ron O'Brien, and even Jonathan Brandmeier and Larry Lujak and Gary Records Brown and Gentleman Jim Gates. God, these guys were just, when they turned on the microphone, they created the same magic that so many stars created when they stepped in front of a television camera or stepped onto a stage. And there was a freedom in that market to be this type of entertainer. It wasn't even that we were broadcasters. We were allowed to be entertainers because that's what the city allowed us to be and demanded us to be. So when I told my parents that that's the direction I wanted to take, they were very, very supportive. And they at the time, college was very important. Every parent wanted their kid to go to college. Today, it's a little different. Personally, as a parent, I push experience over education.
Exactly.
And that's a whole other topic, obviously. But listen, it's 2021, and that's the world we live in.
Exactly.
But at the time, my parents were pushing college. So when I got to that age, I said, yeah, I'll go to college, because I knew I had to I had to be enrolled somewhere to get internships at these radio stations, you know, so everybody kind of won there. But yeah, they were behind any dream that I've ever had, crazy and as illogical as it may have sounded to them.
So where'd you head off to college?
Well, I went to the University of Missouri, St. Louis, and I was there for 2 years, every semester applying at their jazz radio station. I've always loved jazz. I think jazz is a fabulous form of music. It's relaxing. It's intellectual. It's just incredible. And I really wanted to work at this jazz station, and they had a very NPR style delivery, very laid back, very conversational.
Okay.
And I guess at 18, 19 years old, I just didn't have that because they would not hire me.
Too much energy, huh? Too much.
Yeah,
energy?
well, something. I mean, I don't know. I used to get excited just to walk into the administrative office of the radio station and see that on-air light and fill out an application, but they would not hire me. Eventually, I heard of a radio station called KYMC in St. Louis, which was at the time an alternative music station. Depeche Mode, The Cure, Erasure, the Ramones, you know, really great music. And I never understood that categorization of alternative. I think everything is an alternate to something, an alternative to something. But that was where it was happening. The kids were listening to this type of music.
Yeah, absolutely.
They had a 1 to 3 a.m. shift available 3 days a week, and I took it. You know, I couldn't understand why it was available. You know,
wow.
Somebody would rather sleep than be on the radio. I didn't get that.
Yeah.
But so I worked there, and then eventually got an internship at a top 40 radio station. And with just a couple of semesters left to go, I chose vocation instead of education, and I haven't looked back.
Oh, that's great. So yeah, I'm guessing that there's nothing in the world like being awake at 2 a.m. listening to Oingo Boingo, right?
Well, Oingo Boingo was definitely on the playlist.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know, it wasn't so much being awake at that hour. It was getting to the radio station, especially during those winter months, man. I remember driving westbound on Highway 40 in I had a maroon Cutlass Supreme, a 1986 Cutlass Supreme, and I had a leak in the power steering fluid line. Well, listen, I was working for free, man. I didn't have money to get this thing repaired. You know, any money I made went to taking my girlfriend out on Friday or Saturday night, you know?
Exactly.
So I would, before I'd get in the car every night to go to this radio station, I'd have to stop by the mobile gas station by my house and get myself a bottle of this power steering fluid and pour it in there and hope that it got me to the radio station. And the studio was in the library. So in addition to driving in the cold, I would have to walk around the campus in the middle of the night looking for the security guard, the one campus security guard who could let me into the library to fire up the station, you know?
Oh my goodness.
But I look back fondly. To me, it was never a pain. To me, it was never a hassle. To me, it was just a thrill because I knew within a matter of minutes, I was going to get to plug in those headphones, pot up that microphone, and whether it was 3 people listening or 3,000, I don't know.
Right.
But to me, it was Madison Square Garden. You know,
exactly.
There's an old Kiss, Gene Simmons from Kiss tells the story about before the band made it big, you know, they would play these little bars with 8 or 9 people out there, 4 of those people being their girlfriends. And they would say to each other before they went on, every night is the garden. You know, you fake it till you make it. You live as if, and then eventually a version of that vision comes to reality. So that's what I did.
That's great. So after you're done with the 3 a.m. stint to the progressive music, what was the next hop?
The next hop was an internship at a top 40 radio station in St. Louis called Hot 97. And, there I did everything from washing the radio station van to handing out cassettes to listeners at car dealerships to, you name it, the grunt work, they call it.
Right.
eventually that does pay off, and that's something I tell my kids now. The work that nobody wants to do is the work you should grab, because that shows true work ethic and ambition and desire to succeed. And within a matter of 5 or 6 months, time has made the actual number a little hazy, but within 5 or 6 months, I would say I was presented with an opportunity to be a board operator in the world of radio, which means you just control things. You don't speak into the microphone, you just control it. Which was great, because I did learn the timing and
managing the clock and all those.
That's right. Hitting the commercials, signing the logs, doing everything a radio personality does without speaking into this microphone here.
Exactly.
And not too long into that stint, my board operator shift was midnight to 6. So our morning show would come in 5. A little before 5. And it was a guy named Chuck Nasty, the Nasty Man, who had just come up from New Orleans.
Okay.
And he and I later worked together in Los Angeles. He became quite the mentor, but he was pretty wild, man. And I don't know what exactly was flowing through his veins, but there was definitely something more than adrenaline, I suspect, but
more than coffee, huh?
Yeah. He called himself the bald man with the tan, shaved bald, always wore Gold's Gym tank tops, pretty buff at the time. And he used to show up with his English bulldog named Joe Montana. And he and Joe Montana would stroll in about 5 a.m. to get ready for their show. And one morning he comes in and he says, "Hey, don't you want to be on the air?" And I said, "Yeah, of course I want to be on the air." Yeah. And he said, "Well, quit being," and he called me the P word. He said, "Quit being a P word and talk into that microphone." I'm like, "Well, I don't want to get fired." He goes, "Talk into the microphone." Yeah. And I said, "All right, Well, every night thereafter, boy, I would sit there and I would stare at that microphone and I'd just be like, man, I do want to hear myself talk in that microphone.
Right.
So I guess it was about a week later, I waited till what I thought was the dead middle of the night, 3 a.m. And I was getting ready.
No one's listening, right?
No one's listening. At least not management,
Right.
And I hit a song, Old Time Rock and Roll by Bob Seger.
Oh, my goodness.
And I did a short talk break. I hit the call letters. I gave the time and I said, playing 12 in a row, because that's what we did. 12 in a row, 12 songs in a row. And that was it. Oh, and I waited a day or two. I didn't get any blowback.
Right.
Then I went and I talked a couple of times. And then eventually I got caught. And the program director, a guy named Brian Bridgman, who I respected, he had worked in the market early on and then gone to program in Los Angeles. So he was a big deal to me. He called me in his office and he said, "Listen, you're going on the air. We heard you." He had, because they ran scans, where they called them air checks. For those not in the radio world, air checks. And we had these machines that would record 20 seconds every 5 minutes just to log what songs we were playing, what commercials. Well, as it so happens, I started talking so regularly that I got, I was one of those 20-second breaks.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And so he gave me a few tips and they put me on the air just to stick to the basics, but they didn't pay me any more than they were paying me as a board op. So I thought they were doing me a big favor, but it benefited them as well. Now they had a live talent on overnight, but that was the beginning. And,
well, that's awesome. What an awesome story. Under the radar, hoping you don't get caught. That's hilarious.
But we get cocky, we get a little too confident, and but it paid off.
So how long did you stay in radio there in Missouri?
Well, the radio world was really good to me. Midnight to 6 turned into 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., which was really nice. And then the competitor, our top 40 competitor, made me an offer to come over and do the 7 to midnight show, which is where someone at my age at the time wanted to be. Yeah. Huge, they had a much stronger signal, much bigger audience. And I would be talking to that teenage crowd. They're a very active crowd. I was also always very active on the request lines, putting callers on the air and doing things that I knew appealed to that age group. Doing a lot of personal appearances, dressing like the cast of Beverly Hills 90210, which was the big show at the time. Whatever was working for others, I incorporated into my on mic persona, and it we did really, really well. And in 1995, a local television station in St. Louis tapped me to do interstitials, just real short little breaks in between their popular shows at night. Yeah. And so that gave me a little bit of television experience. And man, I fell in love with the lights and the excitement of being on a set, wearing makeup, having somebody fuss over what you were wearing. And as soon as people started calling me on the radio saying that they had seen me on television, well, that blew things up.
I bet.
And one kind of fed the other. And it was a nice synergy that was created. And so the television station flew me out to Los Angeles to interview some of the stars of the sitcoms that they were airing.
Oh, wow.
And I took with me my one VHS tape, my one videotape of the minimal amount of television work I had. We're talking, I might have had 90 seconds on that VHS tape if that. And when I got to the hotel, I saw right across the street an address that was familiar to me. It was the address of the MTV studios.
Okay.
And I knew that address by heart because I had been sending materials there to try to become a cast member on that show, Real World. Remember the Real World?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which was the first reality show, really. Mm-hmm. A bunch of young single people living together in an apartment in some cool city somewhere.
Yeah.
So I had a little bit of time and I walked across the street to MTV with my VHS tape in hand. And I asked the receptionist, who do I speak to about becoming a VJ? Because I thought that was the next logical step.
Right.
MTV was a monster. Yep. Everybody knew the MTV VJs, Mark Goodman and Alan Hunter and Martha Quinn.
Oh, yeah.
And the receptionist, I can still see her in my mind's eye, told me to have a seat. And she called a guy who brought me back I waited about 10 minutes. And then this guy comes out, takes me back into his office, a gentleman by the name of Kurt Sharp, who I honor every time I get the opportunity.
Okay.
And Kurt was the head of talent for MTV. He was the decision maker. He was the guy that did the hiring.
How serendipitous to be able
isn't it crazy? I mean, that would never happen now. First of all, you can't just walk into a television network's lobby anymore.
No.
There are security guards and metal detectors. But, this was 1995 and things were different.
That's right.
And Kurt popped in my VHS tape and he said, well, it's not bad. He goes, but what you need is some representation. And I didn't know what that meant.
Right.
25 years old. And he said, you need an agent. And I said, oh, well, like who? And this is my own naivete playing to my benefit here.
Sure.
But he picked up the phone and he called 3 agents. One of them wasn't taking new clients.
Okay.
Another said, send his tape over. And I said, well, I can't do that. I only have one copy. And those things weren't easy. Those things weren't affordable to dub off, right?
No, that was work.
They were pricey.
Yeah.
And the third one, a young agent, her name was Nicole, said, oh, I just had a lunch meeting cancel. If he can come over now, I'll meet with him.
Fantastic.
So Kurt said he's on his way. And he hung up the phone. He said, listen, here's the address. And he wrote it down on a yellow Post-it note. And he said, it's going to cost you about $40 in a taxi fare to get over there. Yeah. Now I had $100 that the radio station had given me, or the television station had given me to eat for the entire 3 or 4 days I was going to be in Los Angeles. But I figured, you know what? I'll starve. If that's what it takes, I'll starve. We didn't have debit cards or Apple Pay at the time. It was cash or credit card. That was it. So I got in a cab. And I went over to the office. It cost me $40. I gave the driver a $5 tip. I met with Nicole. At the end of our meeting, she said, I'd love to represent you. I think I have some ideas. And 5 months later, I was shooting a pilot for Maury Povich.
Oh my goodness.
Maury Povich, this was at the time when Ricky Lake was at the top of the daytime talk show game.
Yep.
And Maury Povich said, well, let's look for a male version of Ricky Lake. I mean, and that's common in television. You find something that's working, you then turn it just a little to the right, and then you go for it. Well, we shot a pilot. It did not get picked up. But 3 months after that, once the hold expired, E! Entertainment Television picked me up. And I was at E! for 13 years.
My
so
goodness.
Kurt Sharp and Nicole Taylor Perry were people that were instrumental in my life, taking just a beautiful, incredible change. Wow,
what a story. I mean, like you said, there's no way you could line that up today. There's just absolutely no way you could line that up.
There is no fast track to that. I mean, you and I are sitting here and we're talking for half hour, 45 minutes, and it sounds quick and overnight, but truthfully, we're talking, years of overnight radio shifts and begging, borrowing, stealing, yelling, screaming, scheming, just to get heard, to get noticed. And I think that's the way it should be. Here I am at 51 years of age, 30 years later, more appreciative than I've ever been, never taken anything for granted, never regretted a single move I've ever made. Hopefully I haven't burned too many bridges along the way. And, I've got a beautiful family. I've got a wonderful home. I've got a car that gets me where I need to go. And this is really all I've ever wanted for my life. So I'm so fortunate and so grateful.
That's awesome. And that's one of the purposes of my show, is to show people that, just because you're 25 and you're excited and you're smart doesn't mean things are going to just start happening. I have all kinds of friends in all kinds of industries who, that overnight success is over a decade usually. It doesn't happen that way.
Well, I also believe that sometimes, when I do an interview like this, someone will say, well, what was your big break? What was the one big break? And I guess I have to say, if I have to choose one, I guess it's that jump from St. Louis to LA for E! Entertainment Television. Obviously, that put me on a national level, and that was a massive change. But I don't believe in one big break. I think success is comprised of several wins, many little wins. And when you're in the entertainment industry, there will be years where financially you're on top of the mountain, and other years you're paying attention to every dollar you're spending. That's just the way, that's the exchange for doing what you love. There's never going to be a time where easy street is a guarantee.
Right.
And I don't think you should want it to be that way. Growing up in Missouri, Ozark Mountain Country wasn't that far away. And they have a saying down there that, thank God for big old hills and deep valleys, because if everything was just a straight path, you'd wear out. But the hills going down give you a chance to catch your breath and recharge your batteries a little bit. And that's absolutely true. This pandemic showed us that. We all became so creative and so ambitious. At least we better have become creative and ambitious. Now, we're running with a full tank of gas. We're ready to take the world by storm, whatever it is we're choosing to do, new businesses, new relationships, getting rid of toxic relationships or work situations. But it's, as cliche as it sounds, man, this really is a marathon. This is not a quick 50-yard dash that we're in the middle of here.
No, I agree with you 100%. I've always kind of had my own little saying of, life is like crossing a stream, hopping from rock to rock.
Yeah.
And sometimes you take a lateral, sometimes you have to go back, sometimes you fall off and get wet. but you're not getting to the other side of the stream unless you do a lot of different hops. And it's,
well, that's like the old, it's like the old game Frogger. Remember that game? I mean,
exactly.
I think, thank goodness you and I share the same references, but yeah, you're right. That's a great way to look at it. And, you know, I have to, if I really focus on it, I have to say, I don't think I would want to know the outcome.
No,
you know, and I'm one of those guys that I've enjoyed everything that I've done in my career. And it actually happened several years ago where I got to a point where I didn't feel like I had anything to prove to myself or to anyone else.
Yeah.
And from that point on, everything else was gravy. You know, whether it's e-entertainment television or the podcast, which is growing, or 19 years now with the Price is Right live stage show, which is my favorite gig of any I've ever done. You know, I'm doing what I love.
Yeah.
And I'm focused on being the best at it that I could be. I'm focused on the audience. I'm not focused on ratings. I'm not focused on pleasing network executives.
Well,
none of that. It's all for the love of the game at this point, as Michael Jordan used to say.
Well, you know, you're in your 50s. I am too. I'm about a few years older than you. I have this feeling, and I'm guessing you probably can relate to or have the same feeling. Man, the best is yet to come.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I've got energy. I've got experience. I've thankfully got some wisdom, you know, a little stage now. And dang, there's plenty. I just became an empty nester, and it's like, woohoo. Let's rock and roll, you know.
That is an incredible feeling. I'm not completely an empty nester yet, but I love this phase of parenthood where my kids are young adults and you relate to them on a different level. You know, it's like I remember when they were young, everything was about keeping an eye on every step they took, and don't touch that, and don't talk to this person. And when they get on a school bus, you're like, oh God, please just you know, don't let a bully pick on them, or don't let them fall down or be scared or any of that. But now, you know, you see them with confidence and with a little bit of wisdom on their own, and they ask you questions, you know, and that really makes you feel worthwhile. It's completely different now. And, but yeah. And I'm not one of these guys, Rex, to be honest with you, who plans on working until I can't work anymore. I'm a big believer in leaving them wanting more. Yeah. You know, I want to get to a point here in the next couple of years where I only do the jobs, the projects that I want to do. Nothing because I feel like I have to do it because I'm paying for this or paying for that. Right. And that's just, you know, that's within sight, man. I mean, I'm first and goal on the 7-yard line. I can see the end zone right there. And when I get to that point where I can just do my weekly podcast and speak to interesting people like you do, or just travel and host the Price is Right stage show. And of course it's a paying gig, but the real reward comes in sharing those moments with contestants when they win, you know, a trip that they haven't been able to afford to take, or when they win a new car that they've desperately needed, or a little bit of money that helps them pay off some credit card bills. That's, you know, to me, that is success. And that's how I want to ride out, man.
That's awesome. You know, and when you mentioned, you know, your kids being that age, my kids are 18 through 26, and it's more of a mentor role now. You know, we're friends on one level, we're mentors. And like you say, I'm not paying attention to every detail anymore. You know, they're adults, they can do, you know, things, but it's nice to have them come and say, well, how would you do this? Or how would you do that? Or have you seen this before? Yeah, it's a great role. So let's fast forward a little bit up to today. You know, obviously you're doing the Price is Right road show. Tell me a little bit more about your podcast and other things that you're up to, because you kind of have a little empire.
Yeah, well, you know, as a former radio personality, this digital world that we live in now is a dream come true to me.
Absolutely.
As we talked about earlier, you know, being able to broadcast at this digital quality all around the world, and being able to have control over the intellectual property, over the people that we speak to, the things we say. You know, I remember having to carry in my wallet my FCC license.
Yeah.
Because you never know if a representative was going to stop by the station and demand to see it,
Yeah.
The FCC, we were all terrified of it. We couldn't say certain words, and that just made us want to say them more and push the envelope. I think we see now in podcasts, no one abuses the freedom that we have here. We're human beings. We understand the product that we're putting out. So the Host with the Most podcast is a weekly interview show where I speak with what I say is fascinating people doing fascinating things. Sure. Next week, we have on best-selling author and former Navy SEAL Jack Carr, who has a new series coming out on Amazon Prime starring Chris Pratt. His books are monster bestsellers, political thrillers, military thrillers, great conversation. Last week, I had on an influencer named Alex Worley, and Alex is the new face of do-it-yourself. She's the fun DIY girl.
Oh, nice.
Millions of followers on YouTube. Alex was great. I had Lisa from Lisa and Cult Jam on the show a couple weeks ago, going back to my 80s top 40 days. But all of these people are people that interest me. And I think I think as my subscriber thinks. If it's going to be interesting to me, the first thing I have to say is why. Is it just because of something that I was into several years ago? Will the audience care? And once I go through this filter and I realize that, the audience will take something away from this, whether they'll be entertained, informed, or educated, that makes that guest a real get. Right. And all of my shows are 30 minutes. We live in this give it to me right now on demand society. And podcasts, according to the research we've done, podcasts you're one of a roster. Hopefully you join a roster of podcasts that the listener subscribes to. Mm-hmm. And I also know that if they're listening to the Host with the Most podcast on their way to work and they pull over to grab Starbucks, when they get back in the car, there's a very good chance they're going to jump to the next podcast because they want to feel as if they've knocked out as many episodes as they possibly can. We like to clear our phones.
That's right. That's right.
So if I can do a 30-minute show, that allows me to keep things tight and bright. And just go to the meat, just go to the meat of the interview. So the Host with the Most is available on all digital platforms. Sure. And that's a brand that I own. I own the trademark to the Host with the Most. I've written a book called The Host with the Most, Tales of a Tattooed Television Personality. The name of my company is The Host with the Most. So that is my brand. That's my YouTube channel, The Host with the Most. We've been able to really build upon that.
Fantastic. I'm going to have to dial in and listen. That's awesome.
Yeah. I think you'll enjoy it. It's great conversation and it's, I believe in keeping the art of conversation alive like we're doing right now.
Yeah. Storytelling and, everybody's a story. There's a story for everybody. So fantastic. I just love what you're doing. So, is what's next on the horizon? Is it just mainly building your brand and is there any
continuing to build the brand? Yeah. It's funny. You mentioned story. I'm very lucky to have been mentored by Bob Barker. When I decided and realized that game show hosting was what I wanted my career to be, I was hosting a show called Whammy, the all new Pressure Luck, which was produced by the same people that produced The Price is Right. Right. So I asked our production company, can you get me, I'd like to go to a taping of The Price is Right. So they got me in and I got to meet Bob. And when I left there, I was so jazzed that I went back the next day and the next day. And over the course of several months, Bob and I formed a little bit of a relationship where he would take the time after tapings to talk to me about that particular episode.
Oh, nice.
And give me insight. Well, he took a special liking to me, I think, because of the St. Louis connection. He's a big Cardinals fan. He actually was stationed at Fort Leonard Wood, which is not far from St. Louis. Yeah. He and his wife got married in St. Louis. Oh, wow. So there's a lot of nostalgia there for him.
Yeah, that's great.
But Bob always told me that every contestant has a story. Yeah. And my job is to find that story.
Exactly.
A lot of hosts don't. They say, okay, well, it's nice to meet you, Rex. You could win this, and there's a very big difference. This is the way Bob put it to me. There's a very big difference between saying, well, this is Helen, and Helen's going to play for a trip to Las Vegas. Good luck, Helen. And asking a few questions and then being able to say, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to meet Helen, who just retired from the United States Post Office, where she worked for 40 years.
Right.
She has never in her life been on an airplane, but she loves to play video poker. Do we want to send her to Las Vegas? Well, now you've got, every single person watching is rooting for Helen to take that first airplane trip and to be able to play poker in a casino instead of on her laptop, Yeah,
that's awesome.
But it's the power of a story. You're right. Yeah. But to answer your question, yes, I want to continue making game show dreams come true for people for as long as I can, or as long as I want to, whichever comes first. And I want to continue building the Host with the Most brand, introducing this podcast to a broader and broader audience. We're so lucky. You're so right. It's all about those 5-star ratings and those 2 or 3 sentence reviews. They mean they're our currency. They mean so much. But I hope people will tune in and subscribe and listen to some of the great shows we have coming up. And I just want to keep, I don't consider myself a broadcaster anymore. It's strange. I consider myself a content creator now. That's my world.
And looking back, I had a radio career for much shorter than you, but I had a #1 show in the Denver metro area. It was called Mr. Fix-It. I was literally Larry King for Home Improvements. So, but the thing I love the most about the podcast platform, I don't have a clock.
Yeah.
There's no clock management.
Well, you have to explain what a clock is, because it's not the thing hanging on the wall. It's an albatross. It is a choke collar. The clock is the schedule that a radio personality follows every single hour. In my case, it was play 4 songs, play 6 commercials, play 4 songs, talk about where we're going to be giving away free t-shirts, play 4 more songs. It was so restricting.
Oh yeah.
It was it felt restrictive then. And now that we've broken free from that, we realize just how damaging. And that's why FM radio is on the ropes, if not out for the count. And I know people that still earn a living in radio, and they're free to contradict me and argue with me on this if they so desire. But today's listener, today's consumer should not have to, nor do they need to, listen to 14 commercials an hour. It does. There are too many alternatives, from
way too much content,
streaming music services to podcasts to satellite. The gates have opened.
Yeah, that's what I love the most. It's having that freedom. I can have an interview that lasts 35 minutes or an hour and a half. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's where
the way conversations do naturally.
And I'm not stopping to wait for a national insert, kind of
That's right.
Kind of thing.
That's right.
So I got just a couple minutes left. I always ask every guest this. It's my load 'em up question. So in the Western culture, we have this thing called a bucket list. And I've actually interviewed the bucket list guy, one of the most interesting cats I've ever run into, Trav Bell, down in Melbourne, Australia. Anyway, we got a bucket list, things we want to do before we check out, all right? But there's always an opposite in the universe, So that rhymes with bucket and starts with an F. So I'll put a family show. So it's the F-it list.
Right.
It might be a thing or two that's on your F-it list.
Well,
question. I'll throw a couple out. I'm not going to do a collection of snakes. I'm not eating any more sardines, and no way in hell am I ever going to do another Lakota Sioux sweat lodge. The concept of excessive heat, excessive humidity, drumming and chanting. No, I'm not doing that again.
Well, let's keep it in the industry, because that's the frame of mind I'm in right now. And it's too difficult for me to jump out of that after we've had such a wonderful conversation about it. Never again will I walk into a pitch meeting with a 30-year-old network executive who is staring at his phone while I'm sharing an idea that I'm passionate about. I don't have to anymore.
Nope, you don't.
I've got my own network now.
That's right. You own it.
Never again will I. You know what? I bet you I never get married again.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm all for love and romance and monogamy, but I'll probably never sign a document, uh, for proving that I love someone again. Uh, but the bucket list is pretty simple. The bucket list is I want to travel more. I'm an avid international traveler. I don't even know how many countries I've been to, but I don't want to stop.
Nope.
And that's why I still, that's why I want to only do the work projects that I want to do, because I want to still be energetic and vibrant and physically able to hop on a 19-hour flight, or to walk up a mountain, at least part of it, if I so desire. But yeah, I think the bucket list is to just fill that bucket with things that excite me. And the effort list is to keep that bucket empty of things that don't.
Well, thank you for coming on today, Todd. It's
been a pleasure, Rex.
A great interview. It's great journey you've been on, and you've proven to the world once again it's not something that just falls out of the sky. So I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So thanks.
Well, I thank you. I've really enjoyed it, and I wish you continued success. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you and your listeners. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, folks, we'll call that an episode for today. Don't forget to stop by the show website, rexandrewshow.com. Todd's profile is on the site, and we're excited to have him there. And so until next time, the three things I always say is be safe, be bold, but make it a great day.